The great chamber of the Galactic Council was silent. The air itself felt heavy, as if the universe was holding its breath. From hundreds of worlds, delegates gathered, their strange forms glowing beneath the cold light of distant suns. Floating banners shimmered with alien symbols. The entire galaxy watched as the judgment of one species was about to be declared. At the center stood Ambassador Alara Voss, humanity's final voice among the stars. She wore the deep blue of Earth's diplomatic corps, though the planet itself now lay a pale memory in the minds of most. Her face was calm, but her eyes, those gray, storm-filled eyes, carried both pride and grief. She already knew what was coming. The High Speaker of the Council, an ancient being of translucent skin and golden eyes, raised his hand. The hall trembled as his amplified voice filled the chamber. By the vote of the Galactic Union, he said slowly, humanity is hereby exiled from the known territories. No world shall harbor them. No station shall trade with them. They are to leave Union space within one cycle. The words struck like thunder. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, some in agreement, some in discomfort. No one dared to speak against the decision. Alara's throat tightened. She took one step forward. "Exile?" she said, her voice trembling but strong. "After all we have done? We fought your wars. We rebuilt your shattered colonies. We shared our technology. Our blood has watered your soil." The speaker's golden eyes flickered. "And your blood has burned it, Ambassador. Your kind is dangerous, too emotional, too unpredictable. You bring both creation and chaos in equal measure. The galaxy cannot survive your kind of fire." A wave of silence swept the hall. Alara looked around, at the delegates of races humanity had once saved from extinction, the ones who had once called her people brothers. But none met her eyes. Even the allies who owed humanity everything now turned away, afraid of standing beside the condemned. Her voice broke, soft but fierce. "You call us dangerous because we feel, because we love, because we hope, because we fight for more than survival. If that is a crime, then yes, we are guilty." The speaker lowered his gaze. "Leave, Ambassador. The Council's decision is final." For a moment, Alara stood still. The weight of centuries pressed down on her shoulders. Humanity's journey among the stars had begun with dreams of unity, of peace. They had built cities on moons, traded laughter across galaxies, shared songs with creatures of light and shadow. But now, it was over. She turned to leave, her boots echoing through the chamber. Before stepping through the great doors, she stopped and looked back one last time. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "One day when the darkness comes for you again, you will call for help and no one will answer." And then she was gone. Outside, waiting on the steps of the council hall, thousands of humans stood in silence. Soldiers, diplomats, children, people from 100 worlds. When they saw her face, they understood. The whispers spread through the crowd like fire. "It's done. We've been banished." Alara looked up at the massive viewports where the stars burned beyond the city. For the first time in centuries, they seemed cold. The galaxy that once felt like home now looked like a stranger. That night, the human fleet gathered in orbit around the council capital. Great ships, battleships, carriers, freighters lined up in disciplined silence. On every screen, the final message from Earth's representatives was broadcast. The voice of an old man filled with both sadness and pride spoke to the galaxy one last time. "We will not beg. We will not fight you. But we will remember. You fear us because you see in us what you have lost: courage, passion, and the will to dream. You cast us out into the dark. But the dark is where stars are born." The message ended. Across human ships, no one spoke. Pilots sat in their cockpits, eyes shining with tears. Children clung to parents as engines rumbled beneath their feet. The stars stretched ahead, endless, merciless, and unknown. As the fleets turned away from council space, the stars shifted behind them like closing eyes. One by one, the human ships vanished into the void. From that day forward, no human was seen again in the core worlds. The galaxy sighed in relief, believing the human problem was gone. They built new alliances, erased Earth's name from their archives, and told themselves they were safe. But far beyond the edge of their maps, in the silent sea between galaxies, humanity's engines burned like distant suns. They carried pain, anger, and hope in equal measure. They were banished, but not broken. They would build again. They would rise again. And one day, the galaxy would remember the name they had tried to forget. The engines of the human fleet burned like falling stars against the endless black. Thousands of ships, warships, colony vessels, freighters, and refugee carriers moved together in silence. Their destination was unknown. Their home was gone. Inside the flagship Sol's Wrath, Admiral Kai Mercer stood before a large observation window. The galaxy stretched behind them like a sea of broken promises. He could still see the faint glow of council space, now forbidden, now lost forever. His reflection stared back at him, tired eyes, silvered hair, and the weight of millions resting on his shoulders. "Where do we go now, sir?" A young officer asked softly, afraid to break the heavy silence. Kai's gaze didn't move from the stars. "Forward," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the bridge like an oath. Always forward. Across the fleet, life went on in whispers. Families gathered in narrow corridors. Engineers repaired overworked engines. Medics tended to the old and sick. Children peered through portholes, watching the stars streak by, wondering which one might become their new home. Every ship carried its own sorrow. On the Aurora's Grace, Captain Amina Leto recorded a message for her crew. Her voice shook as she spoke. "We left behind everything we knew. Earth, Mars, the colonies. But remember this, we are not running. We are searching. Somewhere out there, there's a sky that belongs to us." Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Supplies ran low. Tempers rose. Some ships vanished into the void, engines failing or captains losing hope. The fleet shrank, but the spirit of humanity refused to die. When despair grew too heavy, the people turned to the stars themselves. In the darkest hours, the fleet dimmed their lights and thousands stood by the windows, watching the distant glow of nebulae. They began to sing, songs from Earth, from the seas and mountains long gone. The voices traveled through the comm channels, carried from ship to ship, until the entire fleet echoed with the sound of hope. For a brief moment, the silence of space was broken by the sound of humanity's heart. Admiral Kai listened to the song from his command chair. His eyes grew wet. "They took our worlds," he whispered, "but not our soul." Then came the storms. In the deep black, the fleet passed through radiation fields and collapsing stars. Great cosmic waves of energy battered their ships. Shields flickered. Engines failed. The Sol's Wrath shook as bolts of plasma tore across its hull. "Hold the line," Kai shouted as alarms screamed. "Protect the colony ships." Even as chaos unfolded, the fleet moved like a single being, each captain covering the other, each ship refusing to abandon those beside them. They were not just soldiers anymore. They were a family bound by exile. When the storm finally passed, half the ships bore scars. Hulls were cracked, systems burned, but the fleet still lived. In the silence that followed, Kai stood before the stars once more. He spoke to all ships, his voice broadcast across the void. "Listen to me, all of you. We are the last children of Earth. We have been thrown into the dark, but this is not our grave, it is our beginning. The galaxy turned its back on us, but the stars still wait. Somewhere out there, there is light. We will find it or we will die reaching for it." His words became a promise, a new creed. From that day forward, every ship carried the phrase carved into its walls. Always forward. Years passed. Generations were born aboard the ships. Some had never seen a planet. They learned to walk in low gravity, to dream among the stars. For them, the galaxy before exile was a legend, a story told by elders. One day, after decades of endless travel, a small ship named the Dawnfinder detected something unusual ahead, a cluster of untouched systems filled with sunlight, water, and life. The message raced across the fleet like lightning. When the first human ship entered orbit around a blue-green world, the entire fleet watched in silence. Oceans shimmered, clouds moved across continents, and golden light bathed their ships. It was not Earth, but it was beautiful. People wept. Some laughed. Some fell to their knees. On the bridge of the Sol's Wrath, Kai smiled for the first time in years. His voice broke as he whispered, "We made it. We finally found a home." He ordered the message sent to every ship, to all of humanity. "This is Eden's reach. The darkness is behind us. We build again." And so, after a century of wandering, the exiles began to land. They built their first cities among alien forests. They planted flags of blue and silver. Children played under strange skies and called them home. The long exodus had ended, not in defeat but in rebirth. They had been banished by the galaxy. But they had found something greater than acceptance. They had found themselves. The new world was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was alive. Wild forests shimmered beneath twin suns. Rivers glowed softly in the night, and vast mountains pierced the clouds like silver spears. The air smelled clean and strange, filled with the scent of flowers that glowed under moonlight. The people named it Eden Prime, the heart of their new home system, Eden's Reach. Around it circled 6 other planets, each unique, each rich with possibility. Humanity had finally found what it had lost, a beginning. On the first sunrise, thousands of colonists stood on the soil, watching the light crawl over the horizon. For a moment, no one spoke. After so many years of darkness and exile, the warmth of a real sun felt like a dream. Some laughed, some cried, and some simply knelt, pressing their hands into the dirt as if to make sure it was real. Admiral Kai Mercer stood among them, his uniform dusty, his eyes wet. "We were banished," he said softly to those around him. "But the stars had a different plan." From that day, the work began. Ships became homes. Metal turned into towers. Children's laughter filled the air once more. Engineers built reactors powered by starlight. Farmers learned to grow crops in alien soil. Artists painted the twin suns. Musicians played songs of Earth, blending them with the new rhythms of this world. Humanity was healing, yet the memory of exile never faded. Every family carried stories of the day they were cast out, of the long voyage through the void, of the friends and ships lost in the storms. The pain became part of their strength, a reminder of who they were and what they had survived. A great monument was built in the capital city, a towering spire of black stone, carved with the names of every ship that made the journey. At its base, these words were engraved in silver: "We remember the day we were cast out." Whenever a new city was founded on another world, a smaller version of the monument was built there too. The people called them the Pillars of Memory. They were not symbols of hate, but of endurance generations past. The children born in Eden's Reach knew only the light of twin suns. To them, the exile was not a wound, but a story of courage. Schools taught the history of the long exodus as humanity's greatest trial, and its greatest triumph. Humanity changed too. Their technology advanced quickly. The hardship of space had taught them efficiency, unity, and creativity. They built cities that floated in the clouds, farms that stretched across asteroids, and orbital rings that shone like halos around their new worlds. But despite all their progress, they never forgot humility. They had learned that power without compassion was the same arrogance that once judged them unworthy. Admiral Kai grew old watching his people rebuild. He would often walk through the capital, speaking to the children who played by the monument. "Remember," he would say gently, "we are here because we refuse to give up. The stars do not belong to the proud. They belong to those who keep moving forward." When he died, his body was not buried on land, but carried into orbit. His coffin, wrapped in the flag of blue and silver, was released into space above Eden Prime. It drifted toward the stars, shining softly, like a piece of home returning to the void. The people mourned, but they also celebrated, for in his lifetime, humanity had risen from the ashes of exile to build an empire of light. A new government formed, not ruled by kings or corporations, but by unity. It was called the Terran Dominion. Its symbol was a rising star within a circle, representing humanity's rebirth beyond the galaxy's reach. The Dominion's first declaration was simple: "No being shall ever again be cast into the dark. We will be the light that others once denied us." And so the Terran Dominion began its golden age. Ships explored deeper into the unknown. Colonies flourished. Trade grew among their worlds. Humanity had done what no other species could imagine. They had built an empire from exile, but beneath their peace, something lingered. A quiet question whispered in every heart. Would the galaxy that banished them ever return? Would those who turned their backs ever remember the ones they had cast out? The leaders of the Dominion often looked toward the edge of known space where the stars faded into black, and wondered what lay beyond that silence. The galaxy believed humanity was gone forever, but humanity had only just begun. As the twin suns set over Eden Prime, the spire of memory cast a long shadow across the city. Its inscription gleamed in the fading light. They cast us into the dark, but we became the stars. And so, under alien skies, humanity's destiny burned brighter than ever before. The exiles had become the builders, the forgotten had become the founders, and the banished had become something far greater. They had become legend. For more than a century, peace had blessed Eden's reach. The cities of glass and light shone across the twin worlds. Human ships moved between systems like silverbirds, and the Terran Dominion had become a symbol of hope and unity. Children no longer remembered the exile. They grew up learning about it in history lessons, seeing it as a story of triumph rather than pain. The Dominion's fleets explored distant stars, discovering ancient ruins, new life, and forgotten wonders. Humanity had become the quiet guardian of the unknown. But peace, like all beautiful things, never lasts forever. One evening, as the twin suns sank below the horizon, a strange signal reached the Dominion's deep space relay. It came from beyond the edge of their maps, from the old galaxy that had once banished them. The signal was faint, broken, and desperate. At first, no one believed it was real. Then the words were decoded. "This is the Galactic Council, requesting aid. Under attack. Worlds falling. Please. Anyone." The message repeated again and again like a ghost from the past. In the Great Hall of Stars, now the capital of the Terran Dominion, the leaders gathered. High Chancellor Mira Solis stood at the center, the holographic message flickering before her eyes. Around her sat admirals, scientists, and ministers. All stared at the signal in silence. "After all these years," whispered General Eric Voss, "they come to us for help?" The council murmured among themselves. Some faces were filled with anger, others with sorrow. The wounds of history had never fully healed. Admiral Alara Mercer, the granddaughter of the great Kai Mercer, rose from her seat. Her voice was calm but cold. "These are the same beings who cast us into the void. They called us dangerous, unworthy. Now they want us to save them." Another voice, older and softer, spoke from the end of the table. It was Elder Terran Holt, one of the last who remembered Earth's final years. "Hatred builds walls," he said. "But compassion builds worlds. If we ignore their cries, we become the monsters they once believed us to be." Ilara looked down, her jaw tight. She wanted to agree, but her heart was torn. She remembered the stories her grandfather told, the day humanity was exiled, the pain, the silence of the stars. Mira Solis turned toward her. "What do you think, Admiral? Should we answer their call?" Ilara hesitated. "If we go," she said quietly, "we don't go as their servants or their saviors. We go as equals. We go to remind them who we are." The council chamber fell silent. Then Mira nodded slowly. "Prepare the fleet." Within days, the Dominion awakened from its peaceful slumber. The great shipyards of Eden's Reach burned bright once more. Massive battleships, sleek carriers, and swift escorts filled the skies. The old war banners of blue and silver were raised again, not for vengeance, but for duty. The people watched in awe as the fleets launched into the dark. For the first time in a century, the engines roared like thunder across the heavens. Children waved, elders prayed, and veterans saluted as the ships vanished into the black sea of space. The journey back toward the galaxy was long. Along the way, the fleets passed silent systems and dead worlds. They saw planets burned to dust, stations torn apart, and ships drifting like skeletons in the dark. The invaders had already been there, unknown forces tearing through what once was the proud Galactic Union. When they finally reached Council space, they saw it, a burning world, cracked and broken, surrounded by the dying remnants of alien fleets. The message had been true. The galaxy that had once banished humanity was collapsing under its own fragility. A small council ship approached the Dominion's flagship. Its hull was scarred, its engines flickering. Inside was Ambassador Tevek, a creature of crystal skin and golden eyes, the same species that once delivered humanity's exile. He stood before Ilara on the command deck, his voice trembling. "You came," he whispered. "After what we did to you, you still came." Ilara studied him in silence. "You were right to fear us," she said softly. "But not for the reasons you thought." Tevek lowered his head. "Our worlds are dying. We have no one left to turn to. Will you help us? Ilara looked out at the burning stars. Her eyes filled with both sorrow and pride. When we were cast out, she said, we promised ourselves that no one would ever face the dark alone again. She turned toward her fleet. Prepare rescue operations. Save as many as you can. As her orders spread, human ships moved like angels through the smoke. They brought food, medicine, and firepower. They rescued the dying, rebuilt the broken, and defended the helpless. The same galaxy that had once called them monsters now looked to them as saviors. For the first time in history, the stars themselves seemed to whisper a truth older than pride or fear. Humanity had not just survived the dark, they had become the light. The once proud galaxy lay in ruins. Stars that once held great cities now burned with the fire of war. Countless species fled from their dying worlds, seeking safety wherever light still existed. At the edge of the chaos, the Terran Dominion stood tall. Their ships formed a wall of silver and steel, their banners glowing blue and white. For the broken races of the galaxy, humanity had become the last hope. Inside the command bridge of the flagship Sol's Wrath II, Admiral Ilara Mercer stood before the massive viewing window. Her eyes studied the distant fires of collapsing worlds. She remembered the stories of her grandfather, how the galaxy had turned its back on them, how they had been cast into the cold. Now the same galaxy knelt before her. A voice broke her thoughts. Admiral, said Captain Aidan Vale, the Council remnants are requesting sanctuary. Their fleets are destroyed, they're begging for help. Ilara closed her eyes. The word begging felt strange. Humanity had once begged too, for understanding, for forgiveness, and none had listened. Open the channel, she said. The holo display flickered to life, showing the weary faces of alien leaders, the same species that had voted to exile humanity centuries ago. They looked frightened, broken, desperate. Admiral Mercer, said Ambassador Tivek, his crystalline skin dim. Our worlds are gone, our people are dying. You have every right to hate us, but please, we beg you, help us survive. The bridge went silent. Officers exchanged glances, unsure what their admiral would say. Every human in that room carried the memory of exile like a scar. Ilara stared at the screen. You cast us out, she said softly. You left us to die in the dark, and now you come to us, asking for mercy? Tivek bowed his head. We were blind, he said quietly. We feared what we did not understand. But you built something beautiful in your exile. You became what we could never be. For a long moment, Ilara said nothing. Then she turned away from the screen and walked to the window. Outside, the stars of Eden's Reach shimmered like jewels. Humanity had grown strong, peaceful, united. They owed nothing to the galaxy that had betrayed them. Behind her, Captain Vale spoke carefully. Ma'am, if we help them, we risk everything we've built. We could be drawn into a war that's not ours. Another officer added, they left us to die once. What if they turn on us again? Ilara remained silent. Her reflection in the glass looked older, harder, a leader shaped by the weight of history. Finally, she spoke. My grandfather once said the stars do not belong to the proud. They belong to those who keep moving forward. If we turn our backs now, we become the very thing they once accused us of being. She faced her crew. We will help them, not because they deserve it, but because we do. Because we are human. The room filled with quiet respect. No cheers, no applause. Only a deep shared understanding. Orders spread across the Dominion. The great fleets of humanity prepared once again, not for conquest, but for salvation. Entire worlds mobilized to build supply ships, hospital vessels, and defense stations. Factories that had slept for centuries came alive, their furnaces glowing with renewed purpose. Everywhere, people worked together. Engineers, soldiers, doctors, and volunteers. The same fire that once carried them through exile now burned with compassion. When the first Dominion fleet arrived at the ruined Council world, survivors wept. Giant human carriers opened their hangars, releasing drones and rescue shuttles. Soldiers carried the wounded. Doctors treated species whose names few even knew. Some of the aliens could not understand why humanity had returned. One small child, a fragile being of light, asked a human nurse, "Why do you help us? We hurt you." The nurse smiled softly. "Because once we were alone too, and someone must choose to stop the cycle." News of humanity's return spread like wildfire. Across the surviving colonies, whispers began. "The exiled ones have returned. The humans are saving us." The banished became the protectors. Back on Eden Prime, Chancellor Mira Solis watched the broadcasts. Her voice trembled as she addressed the people. "We were thrown into the darkness, but we found light there. We built our home, our future, our unity. Now that same light will guide others. We do not answer hatred with hatred. We answer it with strength and with hope." And so the choice was made. Humanity had been given the chance for revenge and chose compassion instead. The galaxy, once proud and divided, now looked to its former outcasts for guidance. In the silence of the stars, humanity's ships moved like angels through the dark, their engines glowing bright blue, their presence bringing life where death had ruled. Admiral Alara watched from her command chair as the first rescued world came into view. Her eyes softened. "We were banished," she whispered, "but not broken. And today, we prove why." The fleet moved forward once more. The same words echoed through every ship, every station, every heart, always forward. The galaxy had once feared humanity's fire. Now it was that same fire keeping the darkness away. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was not a war for conquest. It was a war for survival, for redemption. When humanity had chosen to help the dying races, they knew the risk. The enemy that destroyed the old council worlds, known only as the Devourers, was a storm of living machines. They consumed stars, cities, and even memories. They came from the void beyond the galactic rim, cold, patient, endless. The Devourers had no mercy. They had no purpose except to erase life itself. Humanity stood as the final barrier. Admiral Alara Mercer's fleet took position above the planet Velantris, where millions of refugees had gathered under human protection. The skies above the world burned red as the Devourers approached, their black ships blotting out the light of the twin suns. From her command chair, Ilara looked out at the endless dark swarm. "They're coming," Captain Vale whispered. "Yes," she said quietly, "and we'll be ready." The Dominion fleets formed up. Thousands of human warships lined in silver and blue stood shoulder to shoulder like ancient guardians. Their engines glowed like fireflies against the night. Across the galaxy, other species watched the broadcast in silence. They had seen human warships before during their exile, but never like this. Now they understood what humanity had become. They were no longer the children of Earth. They were the fire of the void. The first wave hit. Devourer drones slammed into human shields like meteors. The sky tore apart in explosions of light. "Shields holding," shouted a lieutenant. "Return fire," Ilara ordered calmly. Beams of white plasma arced through the void, cutting through the enemy swarm. Massive carriers launched wings of fighters, fast, agile, deadly. Pilots dove into the chaos, flying through fire and wreckage, their voices calm over comms. "This is Eagle 9, engaging hostiles. This is Viper 2, covering the transports. Stay on me, don't let them near the surface." The battle turned into chaos. Light against shadow, courage against fear. Captain Vale gritted his teeth as alarms rang around him. "We can't hold forever, Admiral." "There are too many." Ilara's hands tightened on the console. "Then we hold as long as we must. For every ship that fell, another took its place. For every fighter lost, a new pilot rose to fight." It was as if all of humanity's pain, all the years of exile, rejection, and struggle, had forged them into unbreakable steel. On the surface of Velantris, human soldiers fought to protect the refugee camps. Alien families huddled together as the sky burned above. A human medic ran between shelters, tending the wounded, alien and human alike. An old alien elder grabbed her hand. "Why do you fight for us?" he asked, trembling. The medic smiled weakly. "Because once someone should have fought for us too." Tears filled the elder's eyes as he watched her run back into the fire. Hours passed. The battle raged on. The Devourers began to press harder, cutting through the human flanks. Whole ships were consumed, their light snuffed out in seconds. Admiral Alara stood tall, even as her bridge shook around her. "Order the Vanguard and Orion to fall back. Protect the transports, prioritize civilians." "But Admiral," Vale began. "That's an order," she said firmly. "They come first." Then, over the comms, a young voice crackled. "Admiral, this is Lieutenant Wren. We can overload our drives and take a section of them out. It might buy you time." Alara froze. "That's suicide." Wren's voice was calm. "So was exile, but we survived that too." Before she could reply, his ship turned toward the swarm. The screen flared white, a brilliant explosion that lit the darkness like a small sun. Everyone on the bridge fell silent. Captain Vale whispered, "He did it. He bought us time." Alara's voice was soft but steady. "Then we will not waste it." The tide began to turn. Reinforcements arrived. Fleets from the worlds humanity had saved earlier. Ships bearing the banners of a dozen species joined the fight, following humanity's lead. Together, they pushed back the Devourers, driving them into the abyss. The battle raged for 3 days and 3 nights, but when the final blast faded, the stars shone again. Velantris was safe. Humanity had won. Not just a battle, but something greater. They had earned trust. They had proven that compassion and courage were stronger than vengeance. When the battle ended, Admiral Alara stood on the observation deck, watching the sunrise over Velantris. The twin suns rose slowly, painting the clouds gold and crimson. Captain Vale stood beside her. "We lost so many." She nodded, her eyes distant. "Yes, but they gave us dawn." For the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw hope. Not from the old empires, not from the Council, but from the exiled children of Earth. Across the stars, one message began to spread. They were banished, but they returned as saviors. Alara whispered to the light, "We came from the ashes, but we carry the flame." And so humanity stood again among the stars, weary, scarred, but shining brighter than ever. The fire that once burned in exile now became the dawn for a broken galaxy. Years passed since the Great War ended. The fires that once tore through the galaxy slowly faded, leaving behind silence and scars, and hope. Humanity had become the heart of a new age. Where the old council once ruled with pride and fear, the Terran Dominion now led with unity and compassion. Worlds that had once shunned them now carried human banners beside their own. The stars that had rejected them had now become their home. Admiral Alara Mercer stood on the balcony of the Dominion Citadel, overlooking the shining city of New Solara, the capital of the new Galactic Accord. The city stretched across the horizon, its towers rising like silver mountains. Ships moved across the skies, carrying people of every race. Human and alien children played together in the parks below, their laughter echoing through the air. The sight filled Alara's heart with quiet pride. Once humanity had been cast out into the cold void, told they were dangerous, unworthy. Now, they had built something the galaxy had never seen before, not an empire of fear, but a home of hope. Captain Aidan Vale, now a fleet admiral himself, joined her on the balcony. He looked older, his uniform lined with medals, his eyes carrying the weight of countless battles. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" he said softly. Alara smiled faintly. "That we made it this far?" He nodded. "That we became what they needed us to be, when they once wanted us gone." She looked up at the stars. "Maybe that's what it always meant to be human," she whispered. "To fall, to suffer, and still rise again." Later that evening, the Council of Unity gathered. Representatives from every surviving world filled the grand hall. At its center stood the Terran flag, simple, blue and white, with a golden sun at its heart. Chancellor Mira Solis addressed the assembly. Her voice echoed through the chamber, calm yet powerful. When the galaxy turned its back on us, we did not fade. We learned, we built, we endured. Humanity was banished, but in exile we found strength. And today, that strength belongs to all of us. The hall erupted in applause. Some wept. Even those whose ancestors had once voted for humanity's exile now stood and clapped, tears shining in their eyes. Mira continued, her tone softening. Let this be our promise, that never again will fear rule the stars. Never again will pride destroy unity. We will remember those who fell and those who forgave. After the meeting, Alara walked through the Hall of Memory. It was a vast, quiet corridor lined with statues and holograms, faces of heroes from every world. Among them stood the image of Lieutenant Wren, the young pilot who had sacrificed himself during the Battle of Velantris. Alara paused before his image. The soft light of the hologram shimmered on her face. You gave us time, she whispered, and we gave them a future. She touched the cold surface gently, her eyes wet. We will not forget. Behind her, Captain Vale approached. He'd be proud, Admiral, he said quietly. Alara smiled sadly. We all should be. We turned exile into eternity. Outside, the city lights of New Solara twinkled like stars reflected on water. Giant ships hung over the skyline, some human, some alien, all bearing the same emblem of unity. A child pointed up at them, tugging at his mother's hand. Mom, which one is the human ship? The mother smiled. All of them, my love. Every one of them has humans aboard now. The child looked up in wonder. Then, humans saved everyone? The mother nodded. Yes, they saved us all. In the far reaches of space, a new fleet was being built, not for war but for exploration. Its mission, to journey beyond the known stars, to carry the light of humanity farther than ever before. The flagship was named Eden's Promise. On its hull, engraved in gold letters, were the words that had become humanity's creed. From exile, we rise. As the ship prepared to launch, thousands gathered to watch. The engines roared softly, blue light spreading beneath its wings. Admiral Alara stood on the command deck, her hand resting on the console. Set course, she said. Beyond the rim. To new stars. Captain Vale smiled beside her. Still moving forward? She nodded. Always. The fleet began to rise, engines burning bright like dawn breaking over the dark. The people below cheered, their voices echoing through the atmosphere. As the ships vanished into the stars, the galaxy looked up. A galaxy once divided, now united. Humanity had begun as the outcasts, the forgotten, the feared. But in the end, they became something greater, the light that guided all others. And across every world, in every language, one phrase was spoken with reverence and pride. Banished by the galaxy, they built their own empire among the stars. Not an empire of chains, but of hearts. Not a rule of fear, but of compassion. A legacy that would last as long as the stars themselves. Admiral Alara looked one last time at the fading light of home. Her voice was quiet, filled with peace. We were banished, she whispered. But we became the dawn. And with that, the Terran fleet disappeared into the golden horizon, humanity's fire carrying the promise of hope to the endless night.